Hey everyone. Today we're diving into American history, but not the boring textbook version. These are the stories that make you realize history is way more interesting than anyone ever told you in school. Let's get into it. America almost had a king. Right after winning independence, there was a serious proposal to make George Washington king. Not as a joke. Multiple people genuinely suggested it, and one of his officers even addressed a letter to him as Your Majesty. Washington absolutely hated the idea. He just fought a war to get rid of a king, and people wanted him to become one. He shut it down hard. But here's the wild part. If he'd said yes, we might be talking about King George I of America and his royal descendants today. The entire concept of America would be completely different. Washington also set the two-term precedent for presidents by refusing to run for a third term, even though he probably could have been president for life if he wanted. Nobody officially made it a rule until 1951 with the 22nd Amendment, after FDR broke the tradition by winning 4 times. The time America banned alcohol and created the Mafia Prohibition. From 1920 to 1933, the manufacture, sale, and transportation of alcohol was illegal in the United States. The idea was that banning booze would reduce crime, improve health, and strengthen families. Instead, it did the exact opposite. Crime exploded. Organized crime syndicates made fortunes smuggling and selling illegal alcohol. Al Capone was earning an estimated $60 million a year. That's nearly $1 billion in today's money, just from bootlegging. The mafia went from small-time operations to powerful criminal empires, all thanks to prohibition. People didn't stop drinking, they just drank illegally. Speakeasies, secret bars hidden behind legitimate businesses, popped up everywhere. You'd knock on a door, give a password, and suddenly you're in an underground nightclub. It was like the world's longest, dumbest party where everyone was breaking the law. The government even tried poisoning industrial alcohol to discourage people from drinking it. Yes, really. They added toxic chemicals, and when people drank it anyway, after bootleggers tried to remove the poison, thousands died. The government poisoned its own citizens to enforce prohibition. By 1933, everyone admitted it was a disaster, and the 21st Amendment repealed prohibition. It remains the only constitutional amendment that was entirely repealed by another amendment. America collectively said, yeah, this was a bad idea, let's pretend it never happened. The time the U.S. military planned to invade Canada. Multiple times. Most Americans think of Canada as our friendly neighbor to the north. Hockey, maple syrup, politeness? That's Canada, right? Well, the U.S. military has drawn up invasion plans for Canada multiple times. During the War of 1812, we literally invaded Canada. It didn't go well. But even in the 20th century, the U.S. had contingency plans. War Plan Red, developed in the 1930s, was a detailed strategy for war with Britain, which included invading Canada as the first step. The plan involved attacking Halifax, occupying Montreal and Quebec, and securing the Great Lakes. Canada had its own plan. Defense Scheme Number 1, which involved a preemptive strike to capture Albany, Minneapolis, Seattle, and Great Falls before the Americans could organize. Neither plan was ever meant to be executed unless war broke out with Britain, which seemed unlikely even then. But it's wild that as recently as the 1930s, the US and Canada had detailed plans to invade each other. Today, they're the longest undefended border in the world and closest allies. Times change. America's strangest monuments. The United States has some weird monuments. We're not talking about Mount Rushmore or the Washington Monument. We're talking about the really odd ones. There's Carhenge in Nebraska, a replica of Stonehenge made entirely out of vintage cars. There's the world's largest ball of twine in Kansas. Well, one of several competing for the title. There's the Fremont Troll under a bridge in Seattle, crushing a real Volkswagen Beetle. But perhaps the strangest is the Georgia Guidestones. Or at least they were until they were blown up in 2022. These were massive granite slabs erected anonymously in 1980, inscribed with 10 guidelines for humanity in 8 languages. They included stuff like maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature, and guide reproduction wisely. Nobody knows who built them or why. The person who commissioned them used a pseudonym and worked through an intermediary. It cost over $100,000 in 1980s money. It sparked decades of conspiracy theories. And then someone bombed them, and the rest was demolished for safety reasons. One of America's weirdest monuments gone forever, and we still don't know what it was really about. The nuclear close calls. Here's a terrifying one. America has lost nuclear weapons. Multiple times. The military calls them broken arrows. In 1958, a B-47 bomber accidentally dropped a nuclear bomb near Tybee Island, Georgia. The crew had to jettison it during an emergency. The bomb is still there, somewhere in the mud off the coast. Don't worry, maybe. The nuclear capsule supposedly wasn't installed, so it can't actually explode. Supposedly. In 1961, a B-52 broke apart over North Carolina, dropping 2 nuclear bombs. One deployed its parachute and was recovered. The other crashed into a field. When they examined it, they found that 3 of the 4 safety mechanisms had failed. A single switch prevented a nuclear explosion that would have been 260 times more powerful than Hiroshima. There are several nuclear weapons still lost in the ocean or buried somewhere. Victims of plane crashes and accidents. The official count is around 6 missing nukes. Sleep well tonight. Presidential firsts you never learned. Here are some presidential facts that are too weird not to share. Andrew Jackson kept a 1,400-pound block of cheese in the White House lobby for 2 years. He invited the public in to eat it during his farewell party. The cheese was gone in 2 hours, but the smell lingered for weeks. John Quincy Adams installed the first billiards table in the White House and got absolutely roasted for it by the press, who called it too fancy and European. He also used to skinny dip in the Potomac River every morning at 5 a.m. One time, a female journalist named Anne Royal allegedly sat on his clothes on the riverbank and refused to leave until he gave her an interview. She got her interview. Martin Van Buren was the first president actually born in the United States. Previous presidents were born before independence, making them technically British subjects at birth. James Buchanan received an unusual gift from the King of Siam: a herd of elephants to breed in the United States. Buchanan politely declined, explaining that the American climate wasn't suitable for elephants. Imagine if he'd said yes, we could have had wild elephants in America. Abraham Lincoln created the Secret Service on the day he was assassinated. He signed the legislation on April 14, 1865, and was shot that night. Tragically, the Secret Service was originally created to fight counterfeiting, not to protect the president. That wouldn't become their job until after McKinley's assassination in 1901. The Great Horse Manure Crisis. That never happened. In the 1890s, cities had a serious problem. Horses. Cities ran on horses. They pulled carriages, buses, delivery wagons, everything. New York City alone had over 100,000 horses, producing over 2.5 million pounds of manure every single day. The streets were covered in horse poop. In summer, the smell was unbearable. Flies were everywhere, spreading disease. Dead horses were a constant problem. When a horse died on the street, which happened frequently, it was often easier to just let it rot down to a size where it could be hauled away. Urban planners predicted that by the 1930s, cities would be buried under 9 feet of manure. Seriously. They held international conferences to discuss the Great Horse Manure Crisis. Nobody could figure out a solution. And then, cars were invented. Within 20 years, horses virtually disappeared from city streets, replaced by automobiles. The crisis solved itself through technology nobody saw coming. It's a great reminder that problems that seem unsolvable sometimes get resolved in unexpected ways. History textbooks try to make everything seem logical and inevitable, but the truth is messier, weirder, and way more interesting. The United States happened because of brilliant decisions, terrible mistakes, lucky accidents. So next time someone says history is boring, tell them about the time America accidentally almost nuked itself, or when a president kept a giant cheese in the White House for 2 years, or when we tried to ban alcohol and accidentally created the mafia. Because if there's one thing American history proves, it's that truth really is stranger than fiction. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed these weird historical facts, drop a like and let me know in the comments which story surprised you the most. And hey, subscribe if you want more history that's actually interesting. See you next time.